And much of our coverage yesterday revolved around the Department of Justice's review of the Robb Elementary School shooting in Uvalde almost 2 years ago.
It was the most thorough look we've gotten about what happened on that day, but a lot of it confirmed what families of the victims and survivors have said from the very beginning, that there was complete failure on multiple accounts.
Our Leigh Waldman has been covering this story, and she joins us now in the studio to talk more about it. Good morning, Leigh.
Good morning, Leigh.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Leigh, one of the takeaways from the DOJ report was that the chaos and confusion continued well after the gunman was killed. Talk to us about some of those takeaways, including word that the crime scene was visited by people who shouldn't have been there immediately after the massacre.
Well, so after a crime takes place, a crime scene is locked down and the crime scene investigators are called in and they do their investigation. They take photos of evidence, things like that. Well, we learned through this report that members of law enforcement, through their body-worn camera footage, they were visiting classrooms 111 and 112 to just take in what the crime scene looked like, and that compromised the crime scene as those crime scene investigators were trying to do their work and gather that evidence and get everything together so that we could get a fuller picture of what happened that day. But on top of what happened with the crime scene, more of that confusion came out from the school district and also from local law enforcement and putting out this mixed messaging. And now that we know some of the social media posts from that day, saying that all the students and teachers were safe, saying that the gunman was in custody, all of that was blatantly false. So that information put out really added to the panic, also to the horrors of the day, and also to the emotional toll that something like this takes on people.
Yeah, a lot of emotional toll there. So you've developed personal relationships with many of the victims' families there in the last 20 months, which has given you a unique perspective on their grief and their recovery. So what did those families say when that report was released?
Well, the days leading up to when this report came out, there was a feeling of anxiety. What is this report actually going to entail? Are we going to have an idea of what actually happened? Is this going to be as full of a scope of what occurred that day, the failures that occurred that day? They didn't know what to expect. They didn't want to get their hopes up because so many times over this last almost 2 years, they've gotten their hopes up and then those hopes were smashed back down again. I think once they finally got that report in hand, it was 600 pages, so they didn't really have a full chance to read everything before their press conference yesterday, but it was a lot of confirmation. Something interesting that Ronnie Mata, who lost her daughter Tess, had told us in a conversation on Wednesday leading up to the DOJ report being released was that over 2 years, if you're saying something, I think law enforcement didn't do their job that day. And then to have someone else constantly telling you that's not true, you start to doubt your own reality, right? And to have this report come out in 600 pages, lay out exactly what you knew to be true, that was finally that confident confirmation to them that they were right over these last almost 2 years.
Leigh, for all of us that have followed this story closely, we know much of what happens next hinges on Uvalde County District Attorney Christina Mitchell and what she does. What are her options at this point?
Well, so what we've been waiting on since she started her investigation was for her to file criminal charges if criminal charges were going to be filed. That rests solely on her shoulders. The DOJ's report yesterday is simply an overview of policies and procedures, what went wrong, and recommendations, 273 recommendations to law enforcement agencies across the country. Now it's up to Christina Mitchell to file charges if she is going to file charges. She has to prove criminal negligence. She has to have beyond a reasonable doubt that she can file criminal charges on anyone that you can file. So what we've talked to other experts about was misdemeanor charges on some of those officers who responded to that scene. The thing is, many of those misdemeanor charges have a 2-year statute of limitations, which comes up on May 24th of this year. And I believe we have a statement from Christina Mitchell. You see it on your screen there. She released this saying she was informed by the Department of Justice about this report that was coming out. At the bottom of this, it says, while I am hopeful the DOJ report will be informative, my office will continue our independent review for any potential criminal charges. The family said yesterday, you have everything you need now. It's in black and white. You can see that the police officers, the law enforcement who responded did not do their job. They're hopeful she will file criminal charges, but this statement from her, it doesn't give any indication one way or another, and we're still waiting for her to see the grand jury if she's going to.
And with that statement, many people have been wondering if Mitchell herself can be held accountable for a failure to prosecute in any form or fashion so far. What are you hearing about that?
So there actually is something called a rogue prosecutor law. It was passed last May in 2023, HB 17, and locally elected leaders can only be removed through a court process. So what people can do if they have a locally elected leader that they feel is not doing their job, not doing what's expected of them, they can accuse them of incompetency and file that court paperwork. Then a state district judge will weigh in and make a decision. If that state district judge agrees and says that the prosecutor is incompetent, unable to do their job that's expected of them, they can remove them, and then it's up to Governor Abbott's office to appoint a successor. Now, we don't know if that's going to happen in the case of Christina Mitchell. We don't know. It's almost surprising that nothing has been filed in this last 20 months, but that is an option that is out there.
And meanwhile, these families still wait for accountability. Leigh, thank you very much for your insight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Keep up to date with all of San Antonio's top news, weather, and so much more by clicking the like and subscribe buttons below. And once again, thanks for watching KSAT.